Have you ever shared your whole life with someone, only to realize they were planning their escape while you were still trying to hold everything together? Would you stay calm if the person you loved abandoned you in your most vulnerable moment? And here's the real question: if someone you trusted betrayed you while you were literally fighting for your life, would you forgive them, or make them pay? Tell me in the comments. I want to know how you would handle it. And don't forget to subscribe if stories like this one hit a little too close to home. My water broke at 2:17 a.m. At 2:21, I got a text from Dean that just said, "I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving." I was in a hospital bed, 2 weeks early, hooked to N4, nurses moving around me like I wasn't even there. My hands were shaking, not from the contractions, but from the cold silence of that message. 14 words. That's all it took to detonate the life I thought I had. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Dean meant he was stepping out for a minute, or maybe he was just panicking and would come back. I tried calling him. No answer. I texted back, twice. Nothing. Then I did something I'd never done in all 5 years of our marriage. I logged into our bank account. I don't know what I expected to see. Maybe a charge for gas. A hotel. Something small. Something that would make it feel like this wasn't permanent. Instead, the screen loaded, and my heart stopped. Balance, $0. Every single cent gone. The savings we'd been building since I got pregnant. The emergency fund we promised never to touch. The paycheck I just deposited 2 days earlier. All of it, wiped clean. I stared at that number while another contraction ripped through me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at the glowing screen, at the void where our life used to be. I don't even remember how I made it through the next hour. But I do remember the nurse asking, "Is your husband on his way?" And I remember lying. I said, "Yes. He's just parking the car." Because even then, I wasn't ready to admit what had just happened. Even then, I was still hoping I was wrong. But I wasn't. Dean Murray left me over text while I was in labor with our first child, and took every penny we had with him. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when I thought Dean Murray was the answer to every prayer I'd ever whispered into my pillow at night. We met at a church volunteer day hosted by Faith Church, back in the fall of 2016. I was helping organize the school supply drive for underprivileged kids, taping cardboard donation boxes and labeling folders. I remember him walking in late, tall, quiet, wearing a navy hoodie and pushing a dolly stacked with water cases. He smiled at me like we'd already met before. Dean had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. He wasn't loud. He wasn't flashy. Just sincere. Or at least, that's what I believed. We got paired together handing out flyers at the front entrance. By the end of that shift, I knew where he grew up, Decatur, that he loved jazz, and that he thought people who used pens for crossword puzzles were either geniuses or psychos. He said I had bookstore energy, and that made me laugh harder than I should have in public. He asked me to coffee that same day. Within a year, we were married in the side chapel at Faith Church. Simple, intimate, just close family and a few friends. I wore my mother's veil. He wore navy again, his favorite color. Dean told me he had dreams. Not the regular 9 to 5 kind, but big ones. He was building a freelance design business from scratch. He wanted to be his own boss, build something lasting. Something he could be proud of. I believed in him. With everything in me. I was already teaching full-time, so it made sense that I'd cover most of the bills while he got his feet under him. Rent, food, insurance, I never complained. When he said he needed better equipment, I took out a loan in my name to buy him a high-end laptop and editing software. He promised me, "I'll pay you back, babe. All of it. With interest." And I said, "We're married. Your success is my success." For the first few years, it felt like we were on the same team. We'd cook dinner together most nights. He made playlists for our Saturday cleaning sessions. Sometimes he'd bring me flowers just because he passed them on the way back from the print shop. He was the kind of man who held doors open and remembered how I liked my tea. So when the pregnancy test came back positive, I didn't worry. Not really. We'd been trying, not aggressively, but we weren't preventing it either. It felt like perfect timing. We just paid off the credit card we used to furnish our apartment. My school had given me a raise. Dean had landed 2 big clients back to back. I told him on a rainy Tuesday night. He'd just come home from a meeting, soaked through, smelling like coffee and aftershave. I had the test in my hand. I didn't even say anything, just held it up. He stared at it for a long time. Then he hugged me. Long, tight, silent. I remember thinking he must have been overwhelmed, in a good way. But now I wonder if that hug was him calculating. Wondering how long he could hold the lie together. Wondering what it would cost him to stay. Because after that night, things started to change. They say pregnancy changes everything. What they don't always tell you is who it changes, and how. At first, I thought Dean was just nervous. A lot of men are. He didn't grow up with a strong father figure, and I knew the idea of becoming a parent scared him. He said he wanted to get everything in order before the baby came. That sounded reasonable. Until the absences started stacking up. He'd be gone when I woke up. No note, no text, just an empty spot where his body should have been next to mine. Then came the client meetings. At first, he'd give me details, names, companies, project types. But gradually, those meetings got more vague. More frequent. And they started running later. He'd text me from a bar, say he was talking branding over drinks. But I'd see the timestamp, 11:47 p.m. I asked once, gently, if he thought he was overextending himself. He just kissed my forehead and said, "It's for us, B. I've got us." He stopped coming to appointments. I went to my first ultrasound alone. The nurse asked if Dad would be arriving late, and I lied, again. Said he was caught in traffic. At our birthing class, I sat cross-legged on the mat next to an empty space. The instructor smiled sympathetically and said, "Sometimes dads just need more time to adjust." But it wasn't just the emotional distance. The numbers weren't adding up either. I noticed small transfers from our savings account, $50 here, $100 there. Nothing major. Just enough to be plausible. I thought maybe he was picking up supplies for work. I checked our transaction history, trying not to jump to conclusions. There were receipts from high-end coffee shops he never mentioned, ride shares to places he said he hadn't been. A few clothing store charges that didn't match anything I saw in our closet. I brought it up one night while we were folding laundry. He barely looked up from his phone. "Freelance delays," he said. "One of my clients missed a payment, so I moved some stuff around to float us." I asked why he didn't tell me. He looked at me like I'd just accused him of something serious. "I didn't want to stress you out, B. You're pregnant. You need peace, not panic." And just like that, I was the overreacting one. The hormonal one. The ungrateful one who questioned her husband's hustle. So I let it go. Again. That's what I kept doing, letting it go. The missed dinners. The unreturned calls. The way he'd go silent for hours during the day, then come home smelling like cologne I didn't recognize. I'd sit in the nursery, folding tiny onesies and rubbing my belly, telling myself that stress wasn't good for the baby. That Dean was just under pressure. That he'd come back to us when the storm passed. But deep down, I already knew. The man I fell in love with wasn't just slipping away. He was already gone. The labor started slow, tightness in my lower back, a strange pressure I couldn't ignore. By the time I realized it was real, that this was it, I was already halfway through folding the last load of baby clothes. I had a contraction so sharp I had to grip the edge of the crib. The mobile above it, little felt clouds and stars, kept spinning, soft and steady, like nothing in the world was falling apart. I called Dean first. Straight to voicemail. I called again. And again. No answer. I didn't even cry. I just grabbed my hospital bag, called Sophia, and told her I needed her. Now. She was at my door in under 15 minutes. Sophia Woodard has been my best friend since sophomore year of college. We've been through finals, funerals, and job losses together, but this? This was something else. She didn't ask where Dean was. She just helped me into the car, white-knuckled the steering wheel, and broke every speed limit getting us to the hospital. When we arrived, the nurses moved fast. Gown, 4 monitors. Everything blurred together. I was 6 centimeters dilated. The pain was sharp, rhythmic, and deep. But it wasn't what hurt the most. It was the absence. The empty chair beside my bed. The untouched coffee Sophia brought from the vending machine. The constant glances at the door, hoping it would open and he'd be standing there, apologetic, breathless, changed. But it never did. Dean never showed. And when my daughter entered the world at 7:04 a.m., red-faced, wailing, covered in everything raw and real, he still wasn't there. The nurse placed her on my chest. She was so warm, so small. Her breath was fast and shallow like a hummingbird. I looked down at her face, trying to find traces of me. Of him. Of us. And all I could feel was hollow. Not because I didn't love her. I did. Instantly. Fully. But because the person I should have been sharing that moment with, had already chosen to disappear. A nurse leaned in gently, brushing my hair back from my face. "Do you have someone you'd like us to call?" I didn't answer. I just stared out the window at a sky that was slowly turning gold, holding the only part of my life that hadn't left me. And I whispered to her, so quiet only she could hear it, "I promise, you will never have to chase love the way I did." We came home 2 days later. Sophia drove us. She had brought in a bassinet from her own house, rearranged the nursery, and stocked the fridge with frozen meals. She tried to make everything feel warm. Safe. But as soon as we walked through the door, I knew. Something was wrong. The apartment felt hollow. Airless. The TV was gone. The desktop computer. The PlayStation. Even the baby monitor we'd picked out together, one with lullabies and a night vision camera. I walked into the bedroom. His clothes were missing. So were his books. His record player. That framed photo of us from our honeymoon in Asheville, the one I kept on the dresser. The only thing Dean left behind was a wrinkled hoodie at the bottom of the closet and the faint smell of sandalwood cologne in the air. I didn't panic. I didn't scream. I just laid my daughter down in the bassinet, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened my laptop. I logged into our joint account, already knowing what I'd see. The balance stared back at me, $0. Every dollar gone. My maternity leave was supposed to be covered through that account. I had carefully saved every extra check, skipped vacations, packed lunches for the last year, just to make sure I could stay home those first few months without stress. Now, nothing. Not even enough to buy diapers once the starter pack ran out. My heart was beating too fast, but my hands moved automatically. I opened our credit monitoring system. Dean never cared much for that stuff. I was the one who kept an eye on our credit scores, our debts, our payment schedules. And there it was. A $15,000 personal loan issued 2 weeks ago, in my name. I clicked on the details. The signature on the form looked familiar, almost perfect. But it wasn't mine. He had tried to copy my handwriting. Even signed it with the little heart I sometimes used in high school. Except I hadn't done that in years. Dean had forged my name. Took out a loan under my identity. Moved out while I was in the hospital. Wiped our accounts clean. Left me with a newborn and a pile of debt. And he didn't even have the courage to say it out loud. There was no note. No goodbye. Just the echo of a door that must have closed while I was giving birth to his child. I sat there for a long time, staring at that screen. The baby stirred in the bassinet. I picked her up, held her against my chest, and rocked slowly back and forth. And in that quiet, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fall apart. Not yet. Not until I figured out exactly how far Dean had gone. And how much of my life he had stolen. I didn't throw things. I didn't scream. I didn't post a long, angry message on social media or call Dean's phone 100 times. That's not who I am. Instead, I opened a new notebook from the bottom drawer of my desk and wrote 3 words at the top of the first page: he left us. And then I started making a list. Every charge I didn't recognize. Every email from the loan company. Every date and time I could trace back to something that didn't make sense. I opened spreadsheets, made copies of bank statements, highlighted withdrawal amounts. I took screenshots of every account I could log into. I documented everything. There was no one to come save me. No husband, no family living nearby. Just me, Sophia, and this tiny life depending on me to hold it together. So that's what I did. I called my cousin, Terrence Jones. He used to work as a detective in Chicago before he moved down south to teach criminal justice. We hadn't talked much in recent years, life just got busy, but I knew if anyone could help me make sense of this, it was him. He picked up on the second ring. His voice dropped as soon as I told him what happened. He didn't ask 100 questions. He didn't feed me sympathy. Just said, "You need a paper trail, Barb. Everything. And you need a good lawyer. Not just for the divorce, but for the fraud." He crossed legal lines. He gave me a name, Claire McDowell. Said she was sharp, experienced, and relentless when it came to protecting women in cases like mine. I called her the next morning while Sophia held the baby in the living room, humming lullabies and rocking gently in the glider chair we built together one weekend when I was 6 months pregnant. Claire's voice was direct and calm. "Email me everything you have. We'll start with identity theft and civil fraud, and we'll build from there. You're not the first woman this has happened to. But if we do this right, you'll be one of the last." I hung up and exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. There were still dishes in the sink. Formula cans stacked on the counter. My daughter's birth certificate sat unsigned on the table, next to unopened hospital discharge forms. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just a woman left behind anymore. I was a woman preparing. Sophia brought me tea and held my hand while I called the bank. We sat at my kitchen table for hours, me disputing transactions and freezing accounts, her rocking the baby and singing softly. We called the credit bureaus next, placing fraud alerts on my identity. I filled out paperwork I didn't understand at first, read it twice, signed it with hands that only trembled a little. Piece by piece, I was reclaiming my name, my finances, my future. Dean may have taken everything we had. But he underestimated the one thing I hadn't lost, my will to fight. It didn't take long for Claire to start pulling threads. She was quiet but relentless, like someone who knew just how deep betrayal could go and wasn't afraid to look it in the eye. Within a week, she called me with the first crack in the surface. "He opened a private account 7 months ago," she said. "Small transfers, $200 here, $150 there. Regular enough not to raise suspicion. But over time, it added up. She walked me through the numbers. Little leaks, disguised as business expenses. Reimbursed charges. Things that looked normal unless you knew what to look for. In total, he'd siphoned out nearly $18,000 from our savings over 6 months, under my nose, while I was meal prepping for the baby and marking trimester milestones on the fridge calendar. It got worse. Claire had also looked into Dean's business records. He had officially transferred the design studio's license and assets to a fake name. Atrus Glass. A name that didn't belong to anyone in his family. Didn't show up in school records. Didn't trace back to anything real. Just a polished alias with a matching email, website domain, and digital invoice system. He used it to avoid taxes. To dodge client complaints. And more importantly, to protect his money from being traced back to me or to any debt collectors. He built an entire identity behind my back. And then he used it to disappear. I don't know what hit me harder, the betrayal itself, or the realization that he'd been planning it for so long. This wasn't a breakdown. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was strategy. Cold, calculated strategy. The final piece came unexpectedly. I was feeding the baby late one night when I got a message from Wesley Grant, an old friend of ours from Faith Church. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year. He used to play guitar at service, and Dean helped him design his business cards when he opened a food truck. Wesley's message was simple: "Hey, saw something weird. Thought you should know." Attached was a screenshot of an Instagram profile under the handle at atrus.designs. Same portfolio. Same logo Dean used to use. But the face in the profile picture? Dean. Smiling. Alive and well. In the bio, creative director. Dream chaser. Currently in Atlanta. I clicked through the photos. There he was, on a rooftop, drink in hand, captioned, "Making moves with my muse." In the comments Elena Prince had left a string of hearts. Elena Prince. She was his assistant for 2 years. Quiet, sweet, barely said a word to me whenever she stopped by our apartment to drop off client files. I used to make her coffee while they worked at the kitchen table. She had asked me once what it was like being a teacher. I remember thinking she was just shy. Now she was playing house with my husband. Dean was living in a rented duplex in Midtown Atlanta. With her. Building a new life under a new name. Spending my money. Wearing my sacrifices like armor. And the whole time I was healing stitches and feeding our daughter by flashlight during a power outage, he was on balconies with cocktails and curated hashtags. I stared at that screen until my eyes blurred. And then I sent the profile to Claire. Along with one line, "Let's burn this name to the ground." You learn something about yourself when you're forced to rebuild from ash. You learn how steady your hands can be when you're holding broken pieces. How clear your mind becomes when there's no room left for denial. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was planning. Claire and I met in her office 2 days after Wesley sent me the Instagram screenshot. She already had a folder in front of her, marked Boyd vs. Murray. Inside. Bank records, forged documents, IP addresses from Dean's logins, social media posts, and loan statements bearing my name. She looked me in the eye and said, "We're filing for identity theft, wire fraud, and spousal abandonment. First, we freeze his accounts. Then, we come after the business." The name Atrus Glass might have been made up, but the money attached to it was very real. Claire filed motions to freeze all known accounts tied to the alias. She sent letters to Dean's payment processors, warning them of pending legal action. Within 48 hours, 2 of his freelance clients responded, confirming payments made to an account we could now trace directly to the fake identity. It wasn't enough to destroy him. But it was enough to make him feel the tremor. While Claire worked the legal side, Sophia stepped in on the home front. She stayed with me most nights now, sleeping on the couch or in the nursery rocker when the baby wouldn't settle. She made sure I ate. That I slept. That I didn't disappear inside my own head. Then something unexpected happened. Faith Church, the same church where I first met Dean, reached out. Word had quietly spread. Wesley had told a few members. A couple of them remembered me, remembered our wedding. They started a small support fund. Anonymous donors, envelopes of groceries, a check from an elderly couple who said I once prayed with them after service. I cried the day I opened that card. Not because of the money, but because someone still believed I was worth showing up for. Meanwhile, Claire brought in a man named Terence Dunn, a private investigator with the kind of face that looked like it had seen the inside of too many lies. He didn't ask me to relive it all. Just nodded once and said, "We'll get him." People like this always think they're smarter than the system. Terence dug fast and deep. In just 1 week, he traced the forged loan application back to Dean's old IP address, used while I was at school teaching a half-day workshop. He found emails between Dean and Elena, discussing the transfer of assets, the timing of the withdrawals, even conversations about wiping the slate clean. One email had the subject line, "Let's disappear before she figures it out." Terence printed it out and handed it to me in a plain manila folder. I stared at it for a long time. Not because it hurt, I was past that, but because it confirmed what I already knew in my bones. Dean hadn't made a mistake. He'd made a plan. And now, so had I. Dean was served at 8:42 on a Tuesday morning. Claire had it timed perfectly. The process server waited outside the duplex Dean shared with Elena, parked discreetly near the curb. According to Terence Dunn, Elena had just left for a Pilates class. Dean stepped out in a hoodie and sweatpants to grab coffee from the corner bodega. He didn't even see it coming. The papers were handed over without a word. Just a signature on a form. His face reportedly went pale when he saw the letterhead, McDowell and Chase, attorneys at law, and the name in bold, Barbara Boyd. I didn't reach out right away. I wanted him to feel the silence. The stillness of waiting for the other shoe to drop. But a few days later, he texted. "Can we talk?" I agreed. Not to forgive. Not to explain. Just to finish what he started. We met at a neutral location, Claire insisted. A public space, open daylight, no room for manipulation. I chose a small park near the edge of town. Quiet, with benches overlooking a duck pond. Sophia came with me, stayed in the car nearby, just in case. Dean arrived late. Of course. When I saw him, it was like seeing a ghost wear your memories. He looked thinner, but not worse for wear. Like someone who'd started a new chapter and hadn't looked back. He approached slowly, hands in pockets, fake remorse painted across his face. "Barbara," he said, sitting down beside me. "You look good." I didn't answer that. He exhaled like he wanted to perform sincerity. "I know you're mad. I get it. But, it wasn't personal. I just panicked. Everything got too heavy too fast. The baby, the money. I didn't know how to handle it." I turned to him, eyes steady. "You left your daughter before she even opened her eyes." He blinked. The words hit harder than he expected. He shifted, uncomfortable, as if trying to recalibrate his approach. "I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, B. I needed space. I needed to figure things out. I was gonna come back. Eventually." I let the silence linger before I spoke again. "You didn't just walk away, Dean. You lied. You stole. You forged my name. You emptied everything we built. And you ran." He opened his mouth, but I held up my hand. You don't have to explain. I'm not here to understand you. I'm here to let you know the authorities are involved. His eyes sharpened. What do you mean? Identity theft. Wire fraud. Spousal abandonment. The investigator traced the loan to your IP. We found the account under Atru's glass. The courts will see everything. Dean leaned back, like the wind had been knocked out of him. For the first time, I saw something real flicker in his face. Fear. He stood suddenly, pacing. Rubbing the back of his neck like he always did when he lost control. You don't have to do this, B. We can work something out, off the record. I'll pay you back. Just, give me a chance. I stood too, gathering my coat. You already had one. He followed me with his eyes as I walked away. But this time, I didn't look back. 3 months after that conversation in the park, Dean stood in court and pled no contest to fraud and identity theft. No grand apologies. No tears. Just a tired, defeated man in a wrinkled button-up, reading from a prepared statement his lawyer likely wrote. He didn't look at me once. The court sentenced him to 5 years of supervised probation, plus full restitution of the stolen funds. The forged loan was dissolved. The business under his fake name was frozen and later dissolved by the state. All assets recovered were redirected to me and my daughter. But the real sentence? Dean lost all parental rights. Permanently. The judge called it willful abandonment compounded by financial abuse. He was ordered to surrender any claims to custody, visitation, or decision-making. My daughter would grow up without his shadow lingering over her legal records. His name might still be on her birth certificate, but his presence, his reach, was gone. I walked out of that courtroom feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Free. Not just from him, but from the weight of waiting. Waiting for an apology. Waiting for accountability. Waiting for someone else to say, you were right. Now I didn't need it. I had the truth on paper, and peace in my hands. About a week later, a letter came in the mail. No return address. Just a plain white envelope, sealed clean. I opened it in the kitchen while the baby napped against my chest. The handwriting was neat. Steady. Barbara, you don't know me, but I saw your case in the local news. I used to know Dean. He did something similar to me, different city, different lie, same story. I didn't have the strength to fight back then. I lost more than money. I lost years. But you didn't let him win. You didn't let him rewrite your story. Thank you, for standing up. For finishing what others couldn't. Olive Stevens. I read the letter twice. Then I pinned it on the fridge, right next to a drawing my daughter scribbled with crayons that morning. Just red circles and uneven lines. Her version of the world. It reminded me why I did all of this. Not for revenge. But for the kind of future no one could steal from us again. 1 year later, life is smaller, but somehow, fuller. I live in a modest rental on the east side of town. 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen, a fenced yard that gets just enough sun in the morning to warm the grass. There's a little porch swing that creaks when the wind picks up, and a dog named Scout who thinks he owns the neighborhood squirrels. He's protective. Loyal. Came from a rescue shelter with a ragged ear and eyes that said, I've seen things. I understood that. I went back to teaching part-time in the fall. Just mornings for now. Enough to stay connected to the world, to feel like myself again. My daughter goes to the church daycare nearby. They love her there. Say she laughs with her whole face. We're okay. We're more than okay. People showed up in ways I never expected. Blake Dyer, who used to greet at Faith Church, stops by every other Thursday with groceries and jokes that he's quality control testing my cooking. Messiah Clark, who runs the soundboard at Sunday services. Help me fix the broken gate in the backyard. Caitlin, who drops off little handmade bows for my daughter's hair, always wrapped in soft tissue paper with handwritten notes. They were quiet heroes. Not flashy. Just consistent. Some nights, after the baby's asleep and the house is silent except for Scout snoring, I let myself think about Dean. Not with rage. Not with sadness. Just distance. Like remembering a book you used to love until you saw how it ended. I don't want her to grow up hating him. I don't even want her to ask. When the time comes, I'll tell her the truth, but I'll do it with softness. With care. Because she deserves a story that doesn't turn her into collateral. That's why I wrote her this letter. I keep it sealed in the back of her memory box, behind her hospital bracelet and the first photo we ever took. My darling girl, you were born on a night your father left, but you were also born into the arms of people who stayed. People who held you, rocked you, and whispered promises they actually meant. You don't come from brokenness. You come from strength. From rebuilding. From a mother who refused to let you grow up believing love is something that walks away. Never let anyone define your worth by what they leave behind. You are enough. You are everything. Love always, Mom. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of something you've lived, survived, or rebuilt from, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your story too. You're not alone. And if you want more stories like this, stories of heartbreak, healing, and hope, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. There's more to come. Because no matter how messy the ending is, there's always a new beginning waiting just beyond it.